Warning: this video contains descriptions of disturbing and potentially triggering events. If you are not in a healthy place where you can handle this, please click off of this video and watch something nicer instead. Welcome back to my Share My Life series on how my life has gone and how I've learned from it. Today I want to talk about the first few years of my academic pretty much imprisonment is what I'd like to call it, because frankly, school is a form of jail. I'm telling you. They don't let you out for 6 hours of the day. They force you to memorize what they call curriculum, the stuff that you're supposed to need to know. It's just awful. So I started out actually around the age of 2 in a program through the local Board of Disabilities called Early Intervention. And basically what it is it's supposed to be a program where hopefully children that do have developmental disabilities can get the help they need to hopefully grow and become well-adjusted enough that they can actually enter into the mainstream school system. And some of them don't. Most of them do. I was one of the ones that did, but starting out in elementary school was a very big task for me. First of all, I did not exactly understand many social cues from my peers or even from my teachers. Namely, the story where I got myself in trouble for being a smartass because I decided to call my principal by his first name. I had no understanding that calling an authority member by their first name was a bad thing for a child. I thought it was just something that you do when, you want to be polite, you want to be a bit nicer than just saying Mr. or Mrs. whoever, because I even knew then that was a bit impersonal. And I thought, well, I want to be everyone's friend, so why not use their first name? That never worked. Not to mention, especially in elementary school, I always managed to get in fights with the other kids. I can't tell you how many times I got into fights with kids over stupidness on the playground, back when we still had this revolutionary thing called recess that nowadays nobody remembers because, the schools don't want it anymore. Seriously, I'll get into another video about that in the future, about the ways that our American academic system is completely incorrect. But, being in the mainstream, public school system was never really a benefit for me, because knowing now that I'm on the spectrum of being a high-functioning autistic individual, I understand now that what was viewed as nonconformity and just being a sheer bullheaded individual that just didn't want to follow directions was actually me bucking the trend of being fit into a box, when I was so claustrophobic that doing that, even in a psychological standpoint, was suffocating and potentially panic-inducing for me. I did not like having to be pushed at the same pace as everybody else. I wanted to do things in a manner that I could understand and therefore I could learn from. So after about 2 or 3 years of giving the teachers hell with that, I was placed into the special needs classroom with a wonderful individual by the name of Mrs. Brown. Now, Mrs. Brown would be the only individual from the mainstream schools that would actually understand my individual needs and try her best to meet them. And educators, I want you to follow this kind of an example very closely, because it could help your students immensely. Unlike so many of the educators before her, Mrs. Brown was not afraid to go against standard curriculum in order to give me an individualized teaching experience based both on the IEP, the individual education plan, and her own intuition seeing how I was and my own characteristic traits. So, knowing that I was very interested in science, she got me into meteorology and astronomy and all the really interesting scientific stuff. She also got me into math. I hated math for the longest time, and she was able to help me understand the basics of algebra. In grade 3, in third grade, I was doing algebra because I was intelligent. I was just not being enriched and encouraged in a way that I could really take advantage of and move forward with. And this is something that educators need to know. If you're going to teach a child that has individual needs, you need to take an individual approach. That's the problem with 95% of the school systems. They want to have a paint-by-numbers approach to everything where all students are the same, all students do the same work, all students get the same results, and yet you see this huge trend of everyone being on multiple points of the chart rather than following a steady line. Because life isn't like that. Life doesn't like being sorted into rows and columns, at least not naturally. But of course, there came a point where I really had bucked the trend so much that even the mainstream school system special needs staff could not handle me because I had many issues thanks to my early childhood traumas. My main issue was I had anger issues because the only real emotional responses I found that my dad expressed, who I, for some reason, took most of my social cues from, the only emotional response he would ever express would be anger. And so I was always angry. I would always react with anger when I didn't like something. I wouldn't say I didn't like it. I wouldn't say that I was upset or that I was unhappy or that something made me scared or anything like that. I would always just immediately leap to anger, and that's a common trait of PTSD that we didn't know about back then, and even nowadays most therapists and psychologists overlook. But I eventually ended up getting sent to JDC multiple times, juvenile detention, juvie, the slammer. The first time I actually got sent there, the staff there were like, this kid's way too young to be in here. Why is he in here? And they called my parents, found out that they hadn't even been notified I'd been sent. They came and got me because they really didn't have facilities for a child my age. I think I was like 7 or 8 at the time. And so, yeah, it was a pretty bad day for my principal once they got wind of it, because he's the one that sent me. But yeah, eventually, after so many issues and so many incidents of my anger getting out of control, they had no chance but to send me to a charter school, a learning center for troubled and behaviorally maladjusted individuals like myself. So I ended up in there, and then shortly after would be when I went through the most trying year and a half of my life. But that's a story for another day, and I will tell that to you in the next video that I have of this series. I hope you have a wonderful day, and remember, if you have a child with special needs, remember that they can be taught. They just need an individual approach, not a paint-by-numbers, everyone's the same method. Please remember that. Thank you so much for watching, and have a wonderful day. And I'll be back when the day is new, and I'll have more stories for you. And you'll have things that you'll want to talk about. I will too, because it's you I like